So this second one is, I'll read this one. It's how does your objective measurement differ from what they teach you in school? And in parentheses, it's like manual muscle testing, passive and active range of motion testing, mobilizations, these types of things, palpation testing. I'll take a stab at this in the beginning, and I'll try not to babble on too long. I think my assessments do differ a bit from what we learned in school, in the sense that it's not this regimented manual muscle test or passive range of motion first, then active range of motion, then manual muscle test, then palpation. It's like checking off the boxes, because as I've looked into more of the literature on special tests and the reliability of things like manual muscle testing, and what the scores mean or what they don't mean, do they matter, do they not? I get the sense that those tests are not as repeatable and objective as we want them to be, and especially the palpation testing is pretty much any palpation study that I've seen, the reliability is pretty poor, and that goes for identifying, trigger points or assessing joint mobility, like capsular restriction, those types of things, very like nebulous terms. I'm just not super impressed with the reliability and really the validity of even what we're looking for. So I do move joints around. I passively move joints. I usually have the patient actively move the joint first. Just, if they've got it active, I don't really see a need for me to passively move the joint around. But I get them moving. I think it gives me, as the clinician, a mental representation of what I'm working with. If somebody comes in with shoulder pain, I have them move their shoulders around just to kind of see what I'm working with.
Crazy.
I know it is, but I don't necessarily have my goniometer, in hand and measuring every single joint angle, just because it doesn't necessarily tell me as much. Now, I will say this: I do goni some things more as a way to create buy-in and show the patient that, hey, we're moving in the right direction, like a post-op knee. Yeah. Look at that. We're 20 degrees more knee flexion than we had 2 weeks ago. That's great, and it's just something to give to them, and it shows me that things are moving in the right direction. We don't bill insurance here, so I think that would be another thing. I would probably use the goni more in that sense to make sure I'm getting reimbursed and that type of thing. So that's another conversation. But in regards to things like manual muscle testing, the scales, it's all about what if another clinician came in and they should be able to repeat all the testing that I test. So what if somebody who has different strength levels than me versus this athlete, a 4 out of 5 manual muscle test of shoulder flexion may be different when I'm testing it versus somebody else. They may rate them differently. So a manual muscle test in its objective sense doesn't give me a whole lot of information. I do press and pull and, I guess I manually muscle test movements, but it's more to give me a general picture of how sensitized or how reactive what they have is going on, how fearful they are to creating force. And I would rather have a handheld dynamometer for all those testing, and sometimes I do that to objectify those tests as well. But if I really want to test strength, I usually just have them lift weights. So I'll stop there. What do you guys think about this?
I'll jump in. So I've got a very similar philosophy to you there. I mean, I think that I've moved away from special tests for the same reason, that I don't think that the research would show that they're not all that special after all. And I think that if I've gotten a good, thorough subjective in terms of what's gone on, and if they had any treatment, whether that was helpful or not, all those things, then I just want to see them move. And how I structure the assessment is going to depend a lot on what the situation is and what the person cares about. So, I've had elderly people come in, they just want to be able to garden, so we'll go through some active range, we'll see if they can get into a crouch, if they can get up off of a stool or off of a low chair, stuff like that. And then I've had runners who just want to be able to run better. So we're going to look at them running, or weightlifters, powerlifters, we're going to get them squatting and benching or doing whatever seems to be the issue. And then, I tend to like to focus on active range first. I'll probably do some passive range too. I like it especially in cases of, say, tendinopathy or something where someone's got a painful shoulder or joint and they can only move it so far on their own. And then I get them to lie down, get them relaxed. I'm like, oh, hey, look, your shoulder can move this far, and it doesn't hurt nearly as bad as when you did it. That tells us the joint is intact. There's something else going on that's keeping it sensitive. So just to show them they're not as broken as they might have thought they were. And then for manual muscle testing, I don't use the grading system anymore. Like you said, Quinn, I'll use it to get a general sense of how strong they are, if there's a discrepancy between one side or the other, any apprehension to it. If there's a reason to use a dynamometer, I'll use that too. And I'll also use a Gani primarily in post-op situations, just to let the surgeon know, hey, we're here, and then we're moving forward. And also to show the patient that, hey, we're getting better. I was telling my student that there's a patient that I had not long ago who had a hand issue, and we used the hand grip dynamometer on day one, and then it became kind of a game every time he came in to see if he was a little bit better. And like some days he wasn't, and he knew that, but it was just really cool when he was. So yeah, I think that I've tried to focus or to mold my assessment a lot more based on the whys, and does this matter for the patient or for me? And if the answer is no, then I'm probably not including it much, unless, period there. Go for it, Steph.
I'm going to agree with you on that one, Jared. I think that my objective actually is highly based on the subjective. And as far as using some of the traditionally objective testing, like strength testing, like range of motion testing or goniometry, I would say a lot more often for me now it's for buy-in, or for some sort of piece to the motivation puzzle. And what I use more often, I think, for strength-based things, like you said, Quinn, is actually having them lift and say, last week the 20-pound dumbbells were really hard, and those kinds of things. But I would be straight up lying to you if I told you that in the last 3 years I've used like an actual, okay, kick out into me, and that's a 4 out of 5, because essentially it's funny to me that it's called an objective test, and I don't know, some people might be unhappy with me for saying this, but it's called an objective test, but essentially it's subjective based on the test performer's strength, and that same tester might have a different level of strength a different day and perceive it differently. So the whole interrelated or inter-rater reliability stuff, they don't touch on that too much in school. And then, like we know, special tests don't have a ton of specialness to them as far as accuracy and rolling it in and rolling out. Some are higher than others. I would say occasionally I'll use them as part of the puzzle. Again, like I said, if it fits, but something like a shoulder Hawkins-Kennedy test, I do that and it hurts me. And I don't have quote unquote shoulder impingement. I've actually been telling some patients that I'm getting away from using some of the names of these diagnoses themselves, because unless it's something where I feel like it is a super inflammatory situation, I'll use shoulder impingement for an example. I will try to tell them if there's someone who's really upset or nervous about it, like in this position, technically, the end range adduction internal rotation, I'm impinging my shoulder and this doesn't feel good. So like to have it as a diagnosis is sometimes I feel like it makes you or makes other people feel as though they have something wrong. They have, I don't know, for lack of better words, like a disease or something. And it really it's probably some cranky tendons. The same thing as if somebody would have, I compare a lot of different body parts to other parts, but I know I'm digressing. Otherwise, I'm really just saying that I don't use a ton of the actual manual muscle testing. Based on subjective, what things piss it off, I will say that. And we look, go through, cross off our red flags, and then we do those things. And if we can alter the way that they do them so that even if it hurts a little bit less, or after we do some reps, it's not worse, or by next day they return to baseline type thing, then I tell them I would like to, if there's someone who's training for something or an athlete doing something, I'll say this amount of pain with some muscle soreness is not that big of a deal. Like we're going to try and progress this. And then I would say my version of manual muscle testing is kind of that, keeping track of their loading and what they can tolerate.
Beautiful.
Yeah. The impingement thing is funny, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
It's a word. It's a position. I make a joke.
Right,
It's like
exactly.
every time I do a squat, I'm impinging both my hips. Every time I put my arm over my head, I'm impinging my shoulder, just like what you said, Steph. So it's not the position that's the problem. It was the dose of the position that was beyond your tissue's ability to cope. And how do you figure that out? Well, you dig into their subjective. You figure out what the hell they were doing at the time that they were starting to feel their issues, and probably even more importantly, like leading up to that, because sometimes those issues can have a latent effect. It's like things build. So I completely agree with both of you. I love the passive range of motion testing is more of just creating buy-in, like the passive straight leg raise. Just, hey, look, you do have plenty of hamstring length to do.
Yay!
It's not that. Or the functional testing just being objectifying a variation of their goal activity, like what you guys said. There's our strength testing right there. So I love it.